Hello. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Do let me know if I'm coming through. I can see that see your chat. I can see your numbers, but I can't see if you can see me. So do let. Oh, fantastic! I'm on and live by the look of it. So hope you're well. Bit of a wet one today. Got Brolly with me, so we may well have to just take a dive for some cover at some point. But very loud and that's good to hear. But we will do what we can. And hopefully the internet signal will hold up. We're at the university, obviously. We're near the university right now. We're not actually at the university just yet. So hopefully the signal will hold up nicely. And we can have an enjoyable time, even if it is a rather wet one today. So hi, Natalie. Hello, Elizabeth. Hi, Susan. Hello, Tish. Sir John. Very good. Ennobled today. That's very nice, I see. And Leslie is with us as well. Bonnie Stricker, good morning, how are you? And Glitter Stim, what a great name. So a few familiar names and one or two new ones. So yeah, Humphrey definitely is on the mend. So a little Humphrey update. I know you all like to know. Yeah, he's sort of at that phase now where he's a little bit tetchy and fed up because obviously Highlander, as far as he's concerned, he largely feels better. Now, that's not necessarily the case on a morning when he wakes up. He is in pain, so the painkillers have worn off overnight. So obviously there's a lot of this, like Tracy, is about obviously pain management. That said, for most of the day he feels fine, he's quite chipper. And of course now what he wants to do, hi Leslie from Wetlands, it's wet here as well, what he wants to do is be doing all his normal stuff, which is obviously jumping up on the sofa and jumping up at us and running in the garden and chasing balls. He can't do any of that. We're told up until sort of 6 weeks we've got to try and get him, hi Michelle, as little exercise as kind of possible, little kind of stimulation as possible. So his kind of view is what's going on, why is everything gone so boring? So it's just a bit of a sort of tension at the minute of kind of managing those kind of two things. But thank you for your continuing interest and best wishes. As I say, he is definitely on the mend. So we had a little small signal outage there, but hopefully that mended itself pretty quickly and you wouldn't even notice it. So I think we are about on 3 o'clock. Leslie, he sleeps in the cage now. He's out of the cage most of the daytime because he was getting too stalled. So he's on room rest, as you might say. So he's having physio? No, Cheryl, he's not having physio. No, it's just basically walk is the only exercise that he kind of needs. And so he's going out for maybe 3-4 walks a day, depending on kind of how often. So hi, Sandra. You've just joined in time. So the signal just to go up and down a little bit here. It could be the weather because it's rather wet. So let us kick on and kick off, as you might say. We're on 3 o'clock. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, welcome wherever you are. You're joining me here today in York at a place very familiar to me, close to my heart. It's my alma mater, the University of York. And what I thought would be kind of nice today, some of you may have done this too, I've done this once or twice before, but not for a long time, is to give you a nice sort of feel around the kind of campus. We're going to look at the kind of the wetlands, the nature and so forth. But I want to kind of give you a sense really about what it's like to be here, to be kind of part of this community, because obviously I was for sort of 3 years. And when we talk about sort of city universities, you tend to think about sort of urban city life, and it's not really the case here in York. If I just, the first thing I'm sure that you'll see is Wimbledon as well, is we've got a cornfield. So we're very much where the university is located is sort of nesting up against agricultural land. So this isn't really about getting a full urban experience. If anything, life at York is about kind of withdrawal, because you're fairly near to the city, but actually it's the country, and I look at one of them today, but that's the one that I kind of went to. So I feel a lot more sort of able to kind of talk with some knowledge about the campus that I know, rather than obviously one that I don't. So I'm really careful not to kind of obviously film people that don't want to, but I want to take you through Heslington Village, because this is where it's actually kind of located. And it really is a very pretty, attractive village. Like the academics can live down here, very kind of well-to-do, wonderful kind of housing stock. So it is an absolute pleasure. So it's not really what you'd expect from a city university. In effect, you're living in a village. On the inn itself, mentioned in the Domesday Book, so at least a kind of 1,000 years of history in this village alone. It's not simply a case of it's only known for the university. The university has only been here since the 1960s. So it's the university that is the kind of Johnny-come-lately. And as a result of that, there is always a tension between the needs of the village and, of course, the needs of the community. Well, Cheryl, they don't cause havoc twice, because what happens is the university comes down like a ton of bricks. You'll find yourself in the provost's office the following morning to get a girl stripping down. Happened to me on one or two occasions, but thankfully not too many. They take it very, very seriously, keeping good relations with the village. And look at these beautiful blooms over here. But you can imagine, this is a place of very, very high kind of property values. It's a quiet village that just happens to now be next to a university. So you imagine there's that kind of ongoing kind of tension, and it kind of splits quite naturally through these kind of two pubs. I'm going to show you one in a second. Not too far away from one another. But this first one, which has the Derrimore Arms, it's not that students aren't welcome, but there's no kind of toleration of kind of student behaviour. So kind of getting drunk and being silly, you get thrown out straight away. So it's the Charles XII pub about 200 yards up the road, where you can get to be a student and get drunk and play drinking games and stuff. So this is the first of the pubs. Look at these houses, isn't it beautiful? It's really kind of bucolic. So I think there's something about the place, Cheryl, that makes you want to behave. It is a really kind of attractive spot. So I think it sort of self-polices, if you might say. So the Derrimore Arms, the Lord Derrimore, the Derrimore estate was the estate that controlled this also farmland originally, of course. And what we think is there's evidence of it being a Roman settlement. It was famously, very quaint indeed, in the 1960s, 1966 I believe, the famous Heslington Hoard was found, and that's when they were building sort of part of the university blocks, and they found 2,800 Roman coins. So of course to find that many in one place suggests that it was kind of a major settlement. Somebody very wealthy was here, or a mint, or something of kind of importance to kind of Roman society must have been here to warrant finding that kind of, when you find one or two coins that can be just sort of dropped by accident, but with 2,800, that's obviously kind of a meaningful amount. So it suggests that there was some important function, and of course York was a major centre. It was a civic colonia, this kind of second highest status you can have for a Roman city anywhere in the empire. So maybe this was the home of a retired, because colonia means it's a place for kind of retired Roman soldiers. So maybe there was a very wealthy retired kind of Roman high-ranking officer that lived here, and that was his kind of stash, and that was found all those years later. We'll never know exactly what it was, but it was certainly a lot of money, 1,100. But look at these cottages, aren't they beautiful? So students don't get to live here, that I can tell you. So don't think that coming here means you get to live in these places, but you get to live very near. But it's not really what you'd associate, is it, with university? It's sort of, I would say it's jarring, because it's lovely. It works kind of really nicely, I think, visually, but it's not the sort of thing you sort of think immediately, oh, going to university, you're going to be in a village where it kind of looks like this. But nonetheless, let's just take a moment to take in the flowers, because we always do that. That's our thing. So do give me a call if you know what these flowers are. Rather beautiful trumpet sort of shaped violet blooms, absolutely delightful. We've got some geraniums down here in lovely bloom. And it's the people to make the effort, of course, which is lovely, isn't it? When you go to places and you can see that people are taking care of the neighbourhood, and it's a very positive thing you can do, isn't it? So, Elizabeth, I wasn't kind of aware of that lots of in villages, but awful buddleia. I'm no fan of buddleia because it grows everywhere. It's kind of become like the building site or the vacant lot plant. If you don't cut it back, it seeds very quickly. These are quite amazing, aren't they? I don't know what they are. A rather busy bee there, going about his business. So yeah, has Heslington Village, at least 1,000 years of settlement, and quite possibly a Roman settlement too. We'll not know exactly what it was, but as I say, it is mentioned in the Domesday Book, and we've got Heslington Hall, which we're going to have a look at in just a moment. So this is all, if you like, on the way into the campus. The campus is sort of behind these buildings on the left-hand side. We're going to look at Heslington Hall, and then we're going to have a wander around the campus. The rain's coming down again, so we may have to just stop for a moment while I get my brolly out. But as I say, let's go and look at that climbing rose. That's always lovely to have a look at. So very colourful. It's always nice to go places where there's lots of flowers. They just brighten your day, don't they, and put a little spring in your step. Look how pretty they are. Aren't they gorgeous? Roses. It's kind of the archetypal English, isn't it? Kind of climbing roses over a cottage doorway. I think that's what a lot of people like. Hollyhocks. Leslie, do you know, I nearly said of the hollyhocks, and that's such one of my favourite words. It's wonderful. Hollyhock. Such a poetic name, but isn't that gorgeous? Just makes you smile, doesn't it? When I was here, at university, I wouldn't even notice those flowers. It's just how you change, doesn't it? That they speak to my soul now, flowers. Didn't used to, but that's just that growth, isn't it? You notice the old, ageing, creaky, painful bits. But there's definitely development as well, I think, that we experience as people. We get better, don't we, at living? You have to learn something, didn't you? After all these years, being a parent and so forth. My third youngest daughter was 18 yesterday, so nearly at the end of the kind of the parenting cycle. One more year, daughter at school, and then we're finished with that. So I guess I've really learned something along the way. Bound to have. Sign of age, absolutely, it's a sign of age, yeah. We mature, don't we? Like a fine wine, one would hope. I'm going to be a smelly cheese. Decide which you are. Are you getting smellier like a cheese or finer like a wine? Perhaps a bit of both. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at that formal laid out garden. So elegant. So elegant, yeah. So, Heslington Hall. So, as with all these villages, generally speaking, they would have been dominated by a manor house. And starting obviously in the Norman period, originally that would have been a sort of a wattle and daub, wooden construction, manor house. But over time, of course, and they replaced it. There may have been a fortified house here at one time. But country house building sort of starts in the 16th century. And we've got a rather fine example of that right here. I don't know if the gates are open, if we can sneak you in and around, but I'll get you the best shot. So this manor house we're going to look at is first built between 1565 and 1568. So we're talking about the latter period of the 16th century. So for those that kind of like that in terms of periods of kings and queens, that's Queen Elizabeth I. So she was on the throne when this building was first built. Like a lot of buildings, rather grand ones, it's been rather knocked about and changed over the years. It's been buffering. We're back. Okay, fantastic. As ever, generally speaking, the best thing with buffering is for me just kind of I'll just not do that because it can make people a bit sick, can't it? When you. So I'll just try and stick this through the side, taking care not to drop it, and hopefully we can get in. There we go. So this is Heslington Hall. So it was originally constructed, as I say, in 1565 for Sir Thomas Innes, and he was the secretary keeper to the seal of the Council of the North. I've talked about the Council of the North on other tours. So that was basically a group that came together. They were the kind of bigwigs, military leaders, landowners, lawyers, churchmen, and their job was to, if you like, enforce royal power across the north of England. They ran everything from kind of spy networks on Catholics to a kind of tax collecting and so forth. So the clerk to the committee lived here. And in 1708, the hall passed by marriage to the Yarborough family. And they lived here for several generations. And in 1719, Henrietta Yarborough married the playwright Sir John Vanbrugh. And Vanbrugh is a fascinating character. He designed Castle Howard in Yorkshire. And he was a kind of a playwright, an adventurer, an architect, a romantic, a kind of playboy, in the kind of way that you just don't really have these kind of polymaths these days, turn your hand to anything, that these gentlemen, just believe they could do anything. So Vanbrugh designed Castle Howard, which, most people will know, is one of the finest buildings anywhere in the country. By the 20th century, it was owned by one of his descendants, Richard de Yarborough Bateson, who was the 6th Baron Derrimore. So we saw the Derrimore Arms around there. And the last Lord Derrimore, who died, I think, about maybe 10 years ago, was famous. He wrote saucy books. He wrote books about spanking and all that sort of stuff and made quite a lot of money out of it. I can't remember what name he went under, but it was kind of unusual. But that's how he chose to earn his living. That's what he did. And during the war, it was the Royal Air Force Bomber No. 4 Command. So from 1940 to 1945, there was one man living there yet. This was Bomber Command for the Air Force, so planning kind of bombing campaigns and so forth. And now, of course, it's the admin headquarters for the University of York. And I must say that as a student, you went in here very, very infrequently. When you did, you didn't go in this posh end, you weren't welcome at the front. you were shepherded around to the back. I'll tell you what, I'll just go over and I'll just show you a little church. That's kind of cute, if it's not too wet. Yeah, we had to queue in, you had grant checks in those days. If anybody's as old as me, remember getting grants. So on the first day of term, you've got to queue up at this little window, and there's like a slidey window, and it wasn't open just when you arrived, it was open when they were ready. So they keep you waiting in the corridor, and when they decided ready, this window would kind of slide over. What you want? And it was all kind of very officious. But that's what you had to do to get your grant check, and of course once you got it, go to the bank, get it paid in, and then you could have a lot of fun courtesy of the taxpayer. It was a good system, but sadly no longer with us. The young people these days have to get horrendous amounts of debt. I love one now. There should be grants in this for virtual guides. Give us a grant to do this. So just head into Village Church. I thought I'd show you that. Just a lovely spire, Victorian church. It's not terribly old. So it kind of suggests that the village was expanding in the Victorian era to kind of warrant a new church. It's always kind of good sign of seeing how old a church is, because that tends to suggest, if there's a big Victorian church, either you had a medieval one fall down, or you've had, it does, doesn't it? That kind of shot's really working for me. It's that kind of third thing photographers do, rather than putting things in the centre like that. Don't look so good. You put your thing over there compositionally, and you get more mystery and drama. It's weird, isn't it? You see the difference between that, which is what we're kind of born to sort of think, oh, let's put a thing in the middle, and actually that. It's funny. It's just what they call thirds. So you put your main object about 2/3 across the screen. Often a lot of posh portraits like this. You see, for people who spend a lot of money getting posh wedding portraits, they're never in the centre of the pictures. They're just kind of gazing mistily out to the edges. It's what photographers do. So a quick look at the Heston Church. So it's not especially historic, not especially interesting. It's just rather nice. And of course, it kind of binds the two together, because there's actually a very active Christian Union, or there used to be, here at the university. So it's one of the few areas really that, where the kind of town and gown, or village and gown as you might say, would kind of come together and be together, kind of praying together, which is kind of nice, because otherwise there's a kind of uneasy separation that kind of goes on in between. So again, let's have a look at these roses before we go and look on the campus. But I hope you're sort of getting the sort of setting. Yeah, good photography. It's fashionable to say safe space these days. It sort of sounds a little bit kind of, yeah, right, safe space, who needs that? But actually this did feel very safe when I was here. Apart from a couple of things we can talk about a little bit later on in the tour. It felt like a space where you could kind of grow. You could learn about yourself, do some new things, try some new stuff, meet some new people, experience new things, without there being the kind of constant pulse of a city pulling you in. It was a lot of sitting around and picnics and afternoons spent with a bottle of wine, just kind of sitting around. It wasn't a kind of high pressure sort of place, so it really kind of suits. I think it's a good place and space to kind of go and find yourself. Yeah, well, I think what's lovely about the country is we get so much rain. Now, it don't feel lovely like when it's raining. It might rain in a minute, but because it's finding, if you like, so we don't have the parched grass. I don't know where you are, Alpha, but obviously if we were in kind of Texas or Florida, we'd see a lot of parched ground. The only way you're going to get this is on golf course with massive irrigation. Well, this can happen naturally over here, just by kind of rainfall. We're so wet on this island that it does mean that a lot of plants will kind of flourish. So, if you're prepared to put up with rain and cooler temperatures, the reward is the flora and fauna. Whilst not spectacular in the way of kind of tropical plants, I think it's ever present and so varied. What we don't have is kind of monoculture, whereby you'll go somewhere and you'll just see one kind of species of variety. We're always looking at, whether it's planted or natural, a real kind of blend, which I think is visually just very, very kind of agreeable. But anyway, enough of that and my meanderings and wanderings. Any questions? I don't think the chat's sort of too far behind, so it's not a kind of tour whereby we can't stop and go off on the highways and byways of your recollection. So drop in. What's your alma mater? Tell the world if you're where you were kind of senior. Did you go to college? Let's tell each other where we went to, or our high schools, if that's as far as it went. So the rain's coming down again here, and let's give those institutions a shout out. And you type them, I will try and read them up. You like cemeteries, Sarah? Well, good for you. Cemeteries are beautiful, peaceful places, aren't they? Usually there's something very, very calming about a cemetery. I think we can all find calm, and at the end of the day, the weird thing is our life is incredibly short. So Jackie, we can talk about Open University. Liverpool lady, my daughter's at Liverpool, my eldest daughter, who's now living in London. She did law at Liverpool, loved it there. Lived just on off Penny Lane there, what do you call it, Smithdown Road. I'm sure you'll know it. Very big student area in Liverpool. Never went to uni. Yeah, I agree, Leslie. The time to do it was any time before 20 years ago when the fees sort of came in, wasn't it? It was they were all kind of stitched up a little bit there, I think, and lumbered with an awful lot of debt. When at the end of the day, you know, we need people to be doctors and teachers and solicitors and this, that and the other. So I've never really kind of got the argument that society doesn't benefit, and society absolutely benefits. And if we're at a stage where we have to, you know, take medical staff, you know, from third world countries to fill our hospitals, that feels wrong on two counts, doesn't it? One, we're not training our own people, giving them opportunities, but secondly, we're depriving people in poorer countries of their trained medical staff to start things. But who am I to understand the big picture? So we're coming in now to Derwent College, and it's important to say that since I was here, they have changed the name of a lot of the college, which is kind of odd to me. Very odd. This college here, Derwent, was here. It was all others public school educated for some reason. I don't know why Derwent was all public school educated, but it was. Still, one of the last kind of grey tatty bits of the university left. That's exactly as I remember it. Much of the university has been kind of invested in, upgraded, and so I've shown you all the beautiful bits early on, because you're going to be going to look at the stark ugliness of it's sort of 60s brutalist architecture. I think that's what you kind of call it. But it kind of works when you live here. You sort of get used to it. You kind of forget. But it's not exactly the stuff of dreams. But let's go and have a look at Hettings Hall again, because it's rather certainly the prettiest bit. We're going to look at the Mad Gardens around there. So yeah, that was the door down here. When you had to go and wait for your grant check, this was the door you were allowed to go in. You weren't allowed to go in the posh doors at the front. You'd be ushered away by some flunky would send you to the back to go and wait in the corridor for when they deemed it was time to slide open the window and give you your ill-earned check. So we're starting to see the seabirds. One of the things that you really kind of characterises these water birds. Hopefully the rain isn't making it too grey, because there's a stunning collection of water birds here, and we're going to see them in their kind of natural habitat around the lawn. But it seems that somebody's put some food down here for them, so let's go and have a look. I won't get too close because these are young, and the mums can get very aggressive indeed, but it is quite nice to see healthy young ones. So it was a decision made in the early 60s when this was kind of built, was to make it centre on a lake. And the reason for that is this was wetland. You couldn't actually put cattle on this space because they would have got foot rot, trench foot. It was sort of so boggy and so wet. So they decided that, is it Egyptian? Okay. That when they were going to build a campus in York, because there hadn't been one, you'd think there would have been one in York, wouldn't you? But there wasn't. University. So it wasn't until 1963 that it opened, and it first opened in the centre of the city at King's Manor. So this place gradually opened up bit by bit from about 1964 onwards, until it was largely done by about 1968. So that's why you get the kind of 60s brutalist, because firstly it was cheap, secondly it was quick to kind of construct, and thirdly that was the kind of the architecture of the style, wasn't it? You know, kind of big counter states, that kind of grey brutalist. Is it Corbusier, is that his name? The French architect that just loved everything in concrete. It's the great era of kind of, you know, tower blocks and all this, that and the other. So York very much, unfortunately, a victim of that. So what we have got, of course, is a rather nice juxtaposition between the beauty of this Jacobean mansion, ever lovely. There's a turn around here, and we've got waterfalls, we've got fountains. You know, we've got something that is visually very, very agreeable indeed. But bang next to it are some of the ugliest buildings you can see. But to be honest, they're not being ugly to me now. They're just York University. But isn't it lovely? Isn't the hall just gorgeous? UEA, Beauty of the Beast. That's absolutely the right thing. Essex University, UEA. Yeah. Oh yes, UEA, East Anglia. Yes, it is absolutely very, very similar. So I think again, similar period of time of buildings. Who said that? Susan. Yeah. I think similar kind of period where that kind of the aesthetic was it's okay, and it was cheap. You can pretty sort of see it's kind of panels, so they were sort of put together, bolted together. They're not sort of built with brick or anything. It's literally sort of panels of reinforced kind of concrete, sort of bolted together. So yeah, it's quite a contrast, isn't it, between Haslington Hall and that. But increasingly, there's less and less of that. When I was here, this style dominated, but as you'll see as we go around, it's gradually getting replaced bit by much higher standards. But here's the fly in the ointment: it costs a lot more to rent. When I was here, it was a kind of cheap university, small university. It's now 5 times the size of the people numbers. There's 2 campuses. There was one when I was here, and what we had was cheap and cheerful, crappy rooms. Now, of course, what they want is to build rooms that can be sold to tourists and stuff like that, out the season. And so most of it is a much higher standard now than when I was here. But that's changed for you. I did a course at Norwich itself is beautiful. I mean, it's like York, isn't it? It's a lovely city, and very important in the medieval era. Like York, it's a major city, major settlement, big cloth trading centre. Now this movement I can't really see because I think it's better. What these things were originally meant to be, I'm not entirely sure. Duplex, okay. It's hard to say what they are, other than it kind of reminds me of The Prisoner, the TV show, the weird thing from the 60s. There's something of that about it. It's just a bit odd. They've tried to kind of stay on top. It's like a hat of some type. I have no idea. Utopia. Well, thank you for kind of putting a name on it, but you're still sort of left with a bit of the why. It sort of seems like it's long ago lost any meaningful sense of representing anything. Page gave us his hands. Port Merion, absolutely. Port Merion's wonderful. Port Merion is so. If you've not been to Port Merion, you get the chance. Do go in North Wales where they filmed The Prisoner, or some of The Prisoner. Absolutely stunning, like a magical folly village. Absolutely beautiful. But so I think the original intention for the topiary, it's going to be lost a little bit over time, just given the sheer sort of size of it now. So it all looks a little bit sorry for itself, like it's kind of crash landed rather than kind of planned and built. It looks like it's sort of been dropped out of the sky and sort of lost shape along the way. But nevertheless, it's York. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? So what's nice, of course, is you can wander around, and of course, what this meant is there's lots of little private spaces. So it's you and your little sort of gang of student friends. There's always a little quiet space. You can sit. You see what I mean? There's always these little private bits. There's always, wherever you are here, you're meant to be studying, but you got to go down and sit on the lawn and a packet of cigarettes and a bottle of wine, while away the afternoon. It's very cheap wine indeed. The University of York blend. The first bottle kind of galvanise your stomach, and you kind of get on with it from there. But it was not a fine wine. This is one of my favourite spots around here. It's like a bum. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just got that sense of being utterly. It is a special place. But this, I'll show you here, just around here. This sort of folly over here. This was my favourite place. Really, really lovely. Just come and sit down here most evenings with my girlfriend. Again, just finding a quiet little spot. There's people around, but you could always find a quiet spot. That's really nice. So, got a lovely kind of folly up here. Very kind of elegant Georgian building. But Polly's not a fan of UEA or something. But this here, we'll take a bit of shelter out the rain. This was my very favourite spot for a moonlight. I'll just come under here and get rid of the brolly. Signal probably drop. But you'd sit here, you see, and this was your vista. Not so nice on that side, but it's so lovely it's still here. And of course, the sort of strange thing is that there's no one here today, because obviously we're outside term time, so it allows the illusion to think that in some way this still belongs to me, because that's what it feels like when you're here. That it's your playground, but of course it's not anymore. It's theirs. The people that are here now, I no longer matter. The fact that I was here 30 years ago, neither here nor there. I'm not part of it anymore. It's their playground now. But because there's no one here today, I can just indulge myself, just for now, as if it still was, as if I was summer light nights. But it's lovely. I'm so fond of this place. You can probably tell by the way I'm talking about it. I think there's something, isn't there, about these places where we spend an awful lot of time and have so many happy memories, that we view them through extremely, what's that, rose-tinted glasses. I'm delivering this tour through rose-tinted glasses. That's rather fun. Nice bit of a sculpture with the birds in flight. So you can see I've got the brolly here just to take over. So it was a dead tree, but rather than taking the tree out, they got an artist in to turn into something beautiful, and I think they've done a really good job. It's been there a few years now, so it's quite a nice, got like a patina of age to it, which I think is absolutely lovely. That message, see, there we are. So we've done again a thirds. That's how you frame that picture. It is very cool. It's very cool here. I like it a lot. I feel very, very fortunate. So as I say, because this was an area of wetland, when it came to designing it, they didn't really have much choice. The largest artificial lake in Europe, which is what this is. You just see a part of it here. There's loads of it all the way around the campus. And that by doing this, they could basically create a natural drainage point. And so this is how the university works. Any boating on the lake activities, no shell, there isn't. And it's very, very shallow as well. In most parts, these are wetlands. So in effect, it's like a nature reserve for huge varieties of different sort of waterfowl make their homes here. And of course, you see with the reeds and so forth, they've created environments that allow, you know, all the kind of the animals and the fish to kind of flourish. Very good oxygenated water and so forth. So the lake area has two functions. Firstly, it's to create, as I say, a habitat for the wildlife, particularly fowl, waterfowl, but also to alleviate the standing water issue. So once more, there's the folly over there. Yeah, there's not a lot of algae. That's good. I mean, obviously that's good water management, but certain things mitigate against it. I think that these water reeds can really help. And algae, often it's not a water oxygen, isn't it, and heat problem. So there's if you don't have a hot summer, algae, if you've got good, I think it's good water movement, plenty of oxygen. Algae is less of an issue. But again, you see this lovely site and this pug ugly building right in the middle. Oh, it's vast, Cheryl. This campus is huge. Yeah, it's because it's a campus university. In other words, if you go somewhere like Liverpool or Newcastle or obviously the London universities, Manchester, you'll see lots and lots of different buildings scattered, often in one. Most of the accommodation is located on one of two campuses, so consequently they do become very, very kind of sizable indeed. It's a nice kind of reflection, even an ugly building. It's a nice reflection, isn't it? So, well, 34 minutes. So the whole thing is very, very spacious indeed. Lots of these weeping willows. Love these trees. Like weeping willows, they're absolutely beautiful. Until you walk under them, all the rain runs down the back of your neck. That's not quite so nice. And I suppose like little Venice, I suppose. Lots of little waterways, because everything then is about how you orientate the water. And wherever you are, wherever you want to go to, you have to find a little bridge to kind of get there. So, oh dear, I've lost my little. Never mind. It isn't interfering with it too much. Does it sound okay? Hogweed okay. Giant hogweed bad. Interesting. It's impossible not to love a weeping willow, I think. So let's walk this way. Lots of buffering. Is there? Oh, I apologise. Let's walk on. It may be atmospheric pressure because of the rain, and but we'll do our best. And keep going, and hopefully that'll leave it. To me, it's not saying that, but there's always a slight delay using Streamlabs. So when it's saying for me it's good, it might be that 30 seconds ago it wasn't so good, but that's what you're seeing now, if that kind of makes sense. So there's a kind of slight disjoint between. Just got that water down the neck. So very, very green. It's freezing. No, it's probably my end, but we'll just keep walking and hopefully it will improve as we get into the kind of central of the campus. Hopefully the signal, because we're in a lot of trees at the minute, so that may be part of it. So let's walk into the kind of central bit of the campus, and you can see now sort of some of the buildings, and of course the famous central hall looks like a spaceship landed. First, got a bit of a Monet bridge type thing, which is very agreeable, I think you'll admit. So again, crossing over the water is the only way to travel in this university. Meant to write wonky Wi-Fi. Yeah, obviously I'm running a 4G, and that could be patchy up and down, so my apologies. But as I say, the best thing is, generally speaking, keep moving, and hopefully you find a better spot. Comes and goes. Okay. You are all patient, aren't you? And hopefully there'll be kind of ways. Over time, this should improve. But it's not something in our control, really. And we're all kind of looking at kind of tips and tricks to address this, but to a degree, we're at the mercy. And weather, unfortunately, is one of the things that impacts on 4G. atmospheric pressure up and down impacts on signal strength. Something I learnt a while back. This is annoying, but again, what can you do to stop the weather? Not a right lot. So again, lovely trees. Okay, Natalie, good, lovely to see you. Do watch the rest of the tour on the replay. So we're going to have a look now at Central Hall. So Central Hall is the kind of central event space, I suppose you could call it, for want of a better description. It is the building in which I received my graduate certificate. So when I graduated, that was here, and it's been said it looks very much like a spaceship that has landed in the middle of the university, which is a pretty good description, really. And historically, it was used for concert events, but it's been slipping into the water, and so as a result of that, they decided that it wasn't kind of suitable really for continuing, and so there's kind of been a ban on events subsequently to prevent any further slippage into the lake, which of course is far from desirable, but it really is a fabulous building. Look at the contours, the architecture of it really is quite stunning. So ugly and beautiful all at the same time. I'm being stared at by security in a minute, so maybe I'll come over with me in a minute, I don't know. But again, we're just on the central part now of the campus, lakeside, what was known laughably as Vanbrugh Paradise. I was here, I don't know if they still call it that. But yeah, so Vanbrugh, again, ironically, named after a man that could design Castle Howard. They designed a concrete carbuncle and named it after him, which seems really kind of rather harsh look, doesn't it? But they were the Department of History. That's where I studied and lived in here. So again, not very nice, it has to be said. But it's a lot nicer than when I was here. I must say this element here, you can sit and by the lake, is absolutely lovely. So we get a better shot now coming through. I had to kind of move on there because security were looking a bit scowling at me and I wasn't sure if I was going to get apprehended, so I thought I was going to keep walking. But there we go. Isn't that nice? So that's kind of Central Hall. So as I say, that's where degree ceremonies happen, and there'll be very sort of commercial things happening there sort of during the year. But you just get this sense now of how the waterway just kind of defines the entirety of the campus. Wherever you are is kind of where you are in, like, looks dangerous in the rain. It could be, I suppose, but yeah, there's no guards. Yeah, so you can see we're stood. I'm risking life and limb. Surely. Oh, okay. We're going to see Lindsay Hoyle. Sure, it's Manchester way, isn't it? Lancashire. Isn't that lovely? So I think until you first spent time here, yeah, very much like the South Bank in London, the lake. The lake is the central defining feature of the campus, and I spent any time here at all, and you'll soon realise that it's the water rather than the buildings that kind of define the place. But that's okay. It's not a criticism, only an observation. So this, as I say, still is Vanbrugh College, but across the way here is now called Vanbrugh College, but in my day was called Goodricke College. And I think it's a great shame when they changed the name of colleges, not least because if people were here, that's their memories are kind of. So Goodricke College has moved to the second campus now, but Goodricke College has become, thank you, Lindsay, Cheryl rather, has become somewhat notorious, linked as it is to one of the, because I'm sure if I say the name Claudia Lawrence, you'll recognise the name, particularly those that are based in the UK. Hers is a story that's trotted out every once in a while in the media, one of those high-profile kind of missing persons cases. And if I can boot this up, I'll show you a picture for those that can't, because she's a very, very kind of well-known. And whilst it's also, I think, missing person doesn't really sound like, you know, a big high-profile case, the reality is that, of course, it's almost certainly a murder victim whose body has never been discovered. So just for those that have never seen her, that's what Claudia Lawrence looked like. So Claudia Lawrence worked here in Goodricke College. She worked on the catering side. She just came from very, very high stock. She was very sort of in the upper middle class brackets, and she'd been to privately educated, York College for Girls, studied abroad, got into catering, but seemingly enjoyed the work, but didn't enjoy the sort of hours that go with catering. In other words, lifestyle, and came work at the university, so she could basically work daytimes and get nights off. But if you like, it was generally felt that she was better, if you like, as a more accomplished as a cook than needed to be. At 6 a.m. on the morning of Wednesday, the 18th of March, 2009, Claudia Lawrence started her shift here at the college's Roger Kirk Centre. She finished, and around 3 p.m. she was recorded on CCTV passing a shop in Melrose Gate near her home, and she was seen by a neighbour. Lawrence's mood as normal in the morning to walk to work because her car that's in the garage to a building was just down here. She sent a final text message from her mobile phone at 8:23 p.m. and a final incoming text was received at 9:12 p.m. And thereafter, nobody is known to have seen or heard from Claudia Lawrence, or at least nobody has admitted to seeing and hearing Claudia Lawrence. It was rather different, right? The original North Yorkshire Police investigation into Lawrence's disappearance considered various possibilities. Firstly, had Lawrence averaged about 3,500 missing people reports each year in the North Yorkshire Police area, so it's not unusual for people to disappear. But the large majority of these cases are quickly resolved when the missing person reappears. However, as time went on, Lawrence's family became increasingly insistent she would have contacted them had she been able to do so, because she was very close to her mum and dad. So this possibility was dismissed. And it's worth mentioning that this idea of a lover quickly gained traction. Nag's Head pub was a few doors down from where she lived. It was soon established that she wasn't in a relationship, she was single, but she was seeing quite a few guys simultaneously, many of whom were married or in long-term relationships, most of them much older than her. So whether she enjoyed that kind of feeling of power, that kind of sexual power, of being able to have these men in her thrall and knowing that they weren't going to be leaving their wives for her, that weren't easily going to put themselves forward to be putting information into the public realm or into police investigation. So very, very quickly, the police ran up against kind of wall of silence. And it was felt that it was because this was men that knew things, that didn't want it to come out that they were having relations with Claudia. So that very much threw a spoke in the water, because in disappearance or even murder investigations, it's often said that those first sort of crucial few days and weeks are really, really important for kind of establishing cases. If it isn't solved really quickly, chances are it can take a long, long time to be resolved. So that's kind of situation with kind of Claudia. The press implied, absolutely, Leslie. There's always a sense of, basically she was a loose woman, and so she played with fire and she got burned, which of course is a terribly judgmental way of looking at it. As I say, she wasn't in a relationship, but the police seemed to allow, seemed to be quite happy for that narrative to kind of percolate. And so what happened was, of course, then people, signals paused. So I'll just pause it for a second. So the second, and of course, in terms of disappearing, you look and say, well, what's gone? At our house, they found her passport was actually in her handbag, which isn't unusual, but why would you have your passport with you if you weren't going somewhere? But it wasn't with her. Okay? And of course, the other way they can track people these days, of course, is through financial data. Isn't it? When we use our smart cards, we have a digital trail behind us. Not so much in 2009, but still enough to kind of know. So when somebody's not spending money for a long period of time, the odds of them having gone away, and living another life are rather slim. So, so the second kind of possibility was she suffered an accident or a medical emergency on her way from work. But the route from her home to a place of work was checked at an early stage and no trace was found. So this possibility again was quickly dismissed. The third possibility, and reports were made of various people behaving strangely in the Heworth area, which is where she lived, in the days leading up to Lawrence's disappearance. Wow, thank you, Cheryl, all that time. So these reports were investigated without a conclusive result. Now, cases of serial killers who might have been active in the area were also considered much, much more likely. That's what I think. So detective evidence was that Lawrence's mobile phone had remained on until 12:10 p.m. on Thursday the 19th of March. I think that should be 12:10 a.m. actually. I've written that down wrong. At which time it was deliberately switched off. It was determined the phone had been connected to a mast in the Heworth area of York throughout that time. So consequently, it hadn't moved from the moment in time that she'd stopped moving to it being switched off. So this indicates. Has that helped? Are we back? I'm just going to stand still because I think I've got a signal here, so I'm just going to wait, and then we'll go back through the story, and you can tell me where we dropped off, and we'll pick it back up from there. We'll tell it again. Fantastic. So, where did we get to when I kind of went off? Had we kind of got to the arrests in 2016? So I'm going to stay still here. So we'll just tell this story again. So, as I say, the sense was that people believed that these men that she'd been involved in relations with somehow knew what happened, that the police believed that whether they killed or she died by an accident, but they'd been involved in disposing of the body. So the case is regularly kind of reviewed, and in 2013 an investigation led by the Major Crime Unit, when her phone stopped. Oh right, okay, well that's pretty much the same kind of area. So her phone was turned off at 12:10, and that's obviously the suspicion, because obviously it hadn't run out of batteries. We don't think this was deliberately manually turned off. That's what the city, a suggestion that somebody knew where she was, what had happened, and of course, that's where the kind of mystery lies. So they regularly kind of review this. In 2013, the Major Crime Unit, which covers across the north, they looked at the case and they arrested a 59-year-old man. It turned out this man was somebody who lived locally to Claudia, and also he was a work colleague. So it would seem that they felt that this guy had intimate knowledge of what had gone on. Eventually they released him without charge. There wasn't sufficient evidence to hold him. There was always a sense that the police kept coming out and saying, we think we know, we just can't prove it. In 2016, they wanted to charge 4 men in connection with the disappearance of Claudia Lawrence, but the Crown Prosecution Service said there simply wasn't enough evidence to warrant a prosecution and a trial. Thank you, Polly. I'm sorry about this. And so, see if we'll try Facebook Live and see if we can do better. And so, there was no further opportunities, no further leads, and so they gradually kind of wound the investigation down again. And so, the last review happened in 2016, but then suddenly in 2021, they announced they were going to do a search. And this was at a place called Sandhutton, about 8 miles from York. There's a gravel pit in Woodlands. They were going to dredge the lake. And so, huge police operation, lots of media, lots of, search teams, frogmen. They drained the lake, and they did find some articles and possessions of clothing. They're not entirely sure whether they were Claudia's. They can't absolutely definitively say they are or they aren't. But again, they didn't find a body, didn't lead to an arrest. So consequently, that's it. That's where it's at. It's probably one of the notorious missing persons cases in the country. It from time to time pops up on the news, but nothing else. I mean, the family obviously accept and believe that she's gone. Claudia's father, Peter, who worked kind of tirelessly to keep the Claudia's case in the public imagination, he died in 2021. And he was a former solicitor, so he's actually well placed. And he's responsible for getting Claudia's law passed, which is a law that came in 2017. And this finally allowed the family to start to deal with Claudia's assets. In all that time, they had to pay a mortgage each month and deal with and they couldn't deal with the banking and so forth because the rules simply prevented somebody else dealing with it without kind of permission of that person. Of course, someone's disappeared, what can they do? So they brought in a law which basically allowed them to sort of declare after a certain period of time, the courts can say this person has disappeared, not coming back, and so the parents at least then were able to dispose of, get rid of the house, because obviously, of course, it was very, very sad for them to have all this as reminders. So they gave that, but he died in 2021. So he was a wonderful guy, but a tragic case. I don't know if many of you have heard of it. Do look it up. But Claudia Lawrence, it was one of those sort of great sort of mysteries. I suspect will find its way into the Unsolved Murders books of the future. But I did mention that one of the theories had been she might have bumped into, a random killer, and that how rare that is. So it's kind of discounted as being a possibility. And yet, in this very place where we are now, here, Lawrence. So let's just walk on. So we're coming into Wentworth College now, and Wentworth College was the scene of a terrible, terrible crime in 1992, just 2 years before I came to study here at the university. A Dr. Elizabeth Howe came here. She was a 34-year-old Open University academic, and she'd been booked to run a summer school at the university. And she just arrived here when she was attacked. So I'm just going to come and get hopefully a position where we can see the building but also have a good signal. So a lot of it is not here anymore. It's been knocked down, but I'll take you to where the scene was. So Claudia Lawrence, yep, thank you for that. So hopefully we can get into a good position to see across the lake. So the story I'm about to tell you happened across the lake from here. So she's just been here, just arrived, quite literally, on the 25th of July, 1992, when she was attacked. And she had her throat slashed and her body mutilated. She suffered a 28-inch wound to her body. She had a jugular vein cut and was stabbed through the heart. Now, Robin Pask, the 32-year-old laboratory technician from Horwich in Greater Manchester, pleaded not guilty to a murder, but guilty to a manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Now, Dr. Howe was not known to Pask. She was married with 3 daughters, and he'd completed 2 parts of his degree course, and he'd come to York to work on his studies, completely unconnected with Dr. Howe. And the court heard that Pask had set off for York University and took with him a sharp kitchen knife. He bought a second knife, saying later he planned to kill himself. So Pask, apparently, we're told, walked into Dr. Howe's room at the university, just on the site of these buildings in front of us here, near to his own room here in Wentworth College. And Dr. Howe fell or was pushed to the floor. Her dress was cut and torn from her body, and she was left naked except for the sandals on her feet. We're told Pask had slashed Dr. Howe's body with a knife, causing a 28-inch wound from a collarbone bone down to her groin, and he also sexually assaulted her. A number of people in the rooms near to where Dr. Howe was staying had heard 3 high-pitched screams, but saw nothing. After the killing, Pask had made a series of telephone calls to his relatives and had made sexual remarks to them. He's alleged to have told the police he drunk 3/4 of a bottle of vodka and some wine and had taken amphetamine tablets. And the accused is said to have told police he could not explain the attack and that there was no reason for it. He said, "It was like somebody else. I just hit her with the knife. I don't know how many times or where, and she was laid on the floor. It was like I wasn't there. I can't explain it. I attacked her for no reason. Absolutely no reason. I'm not a butcher. I don't go around killing women or have any intention of killing women, but I did." Shortly after giving evidence, the trial was halted as Pask was considered a psychopathic personality with severe depression. He said to only have had a tenuous grip on what was happening during the trial. And 30 years later, Robin Pask is still considered unfit to stand trial, and it's highly unlikely that he'll ever be released from a secure hospital facility. So it's a terrible story, terribly sad. Again, I don't know to what degree you can see, if I can just bring up that tablet. I'll show you a picture because it's always easy to focus on the killers, but I think in this case it really ought to be the victim. What we know about Dr. Elizabeth Howe was obviously she was a very successful academic. She just published her first book. More than anything, she was a mum with a young family. So there is, how you can see that in that light. About 6 months before, the husband, young children, and there she is. A classic one. Yeah, I think he is in Rampton, yeah. It's a secure hospital, obviously. A very, very tragic case. Unfortunately, for this lady just being a horrific case of wrong place, wrong time. It could have literally been anybody. But of course, what was strange is this has happened, less than 2 years, maybe 2 years before I started. It was still a talking point. when I was in the first year, obviously there was third year students here that had been students here at the time. So it was very, very recent. And I went with B block before it was knocked down and rebuilt. The university insists on renting out the room, which we felt was utterly inappropriate. You know, and horrifying for some student to find out what happened in that room. So there's a long-term campaign. In the end, the university didn't sort of give in, as deducted money from the student union. These days, of course, you know, I'm sure that they look at it in a kind of different way, but it felt like a very rough way of dealing with it. So that happened here. So it's really kind of weird, because the whole thing, to me, of being on campus 3 years, you know, it was a cocoon away from silly things, but hopefully, you know, planted the seed of where I kind of then would kind of go on to study history here, of course, which of course I use for these kind of tours. And that all that is true, and yet there's these two stories, the Claudia Lawrence story and the Elizabeth Howe story, that tell a very kind of different side of the campus, or stories associated with the campus, or perhaps by chance, which isn't in any way a blemish on the university. It's simply a recognition that even those peaceful places, you know, flick the switch and, you know, another reality becomes clear, doesn't it? So there we go. So thank you very much. So let's just remember that story as your fault, but so thank you very much. I do apologise for signal outages. I'll continue to investigate what we can do to appreciate that, and hopefully we'll get some of that technology from Hager we've been asking for a while to help us with that. But in the meantime, if you can complete the survey, if you haven't already done so, in this week's newsletter, otherwise I'll post a link to it on Facebook group if you can't get the newsletter, and that will really help us just put the finishing touches of the website, knowing exactly how you'd like things to operate. So for everybody who's joined us, we are just on time now. I know a lot of you want to go to Paris with Flo, so go and join him if you can in the 12th district, I believe he is this week. And always lovely to spend time with you, always lovely to be here at York, and thank you very much. Thank you, Tish. Always an absolute pleasure. So from York University, and say bye and see you for. So tomorrow we've got the Romans in York, by the way. So Roman encampment, back doing that. So that'll be fun. So if you're around, come and join me and we'll chat some Romans, chatty tour tomorrow. Thank you very much, Sandra. It was most kind. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. See you all very, very soon. Bye bye.